Good morning, everybody. So yesterday was a lot of input from a lot of different people with amazing information. Some of it is information that we're fully aware of. Some is we are somewhat aware. But today is more how do we actually use this information in our daily business to become more strategic in our approach to marketing and the overall task of generating top-line revenues. Who's with me today is Sherri. Unfortunately, like yesterday, she can't be here in person, but she has provided us with a really great video. After that video, there will be some exercise to be done, so watch carefully. The same goes for Ivy Esquero, who works as Director of Planning, Strategy and Insights at Hilton. I'll tell you a bit more about her role later on, and she also is not here in person, unfortunately, but provided us again with a great video, which we then use for an exercise afterwards. So again, watch carefully. And then myself, just a bit about my background. I was in revenue management for the longest stretch of my career, mainly with Hyatt hotels. In the days when revenue management was actually just born, so I'm a bit older than most of you in this room here. And spreadsheets was my world. That has evolved dramatically, of course, but I still feel sometimes a spreadsheet can do wonders if you treat it well. I was then heading up sales and marketing for a couple of regional hotel companies here, which really helped me a great deal with my data analytics background and my revenue management background to really drive marketing strategies. And that's what I want to bring a bit closer to everybody today. And today I run my own company, similar to Heidi. I'm a consultant, and I advise hospitality organizations on how to become better in your strategic approach to the business, basically. All right. Before we start, I want you to listen a little bit to one of my favorite pieces of music by a band called Kraftwerk. Most of you may not even know Kraftwerk. I do. This particular song was actually launched, was one of the first digitalized pieces of music in the world in 1969. The year in which I was born tells you now how old I am. I think it's quite fascinating how long ago that actually was and how much digital is still, or is even more important than ever before. And during COVID, I think we all feel that there was an acceleration that happened in terms of how our lives are concerned. Things have changed. They started to change before COVID, but now even more so. And I just want us to really think a little bit through and put consumer hat on. You're all consumers. What does it actually mean, digital life? Content has exploded in the past couple of years. And I want to just use a couple of examples how much content is actually out there and how digitalized is this world. If we just think Google, Google conducts 5.7 million searches every single minute. Every single minute. It's amazing. Another example, Amazon. Shopping on steroids. $283,000 per minute are being spent on Amazon, which allows people to go into space now. That's what we pay for. Or Facebook, 44 million people are actually posting something on Facebook every single minute. So our world is just digital. And think about it, Zoom. We're still using Zoom today. We used it yesterday. So it is part of our daily life now. Again, before COVID, it was used here and there. But during COVID, I think we're all Zoom tired, zoomed out. But it's part of our life now, and it will continue to be so. Amazon, we just touched on. Anybody who has never shopped on Amazon? See? So we're all culprits of it. We make love in a digital world today. And Tinder is just one example. There are several other sites out there, I'm sure you're aware. Food gets delivered, again, accelerated through COVID, right? When we couldn't go to restaurants, we all learned how convenient it actually is to get the favorite food that we want to have very easy and instantly on our plate in our homes. And then our social lives, of course. And again, during COVID, it was my lifeline sometimes just to be on Facebook with people and with friends that I haven't seen, couldn't really talk to. Really helped us from not going bonkers. Expectations, therefore, has also changed. Everything is instant now. Unlimited selections. We as consumers are very much conditioned now that if I want a pair of sneakers, I know where to find it, I can compare prices, and everything is instant. Instant delivery as well. If I'm on a website and it tells me delivery maybe in a week, I go somewhere else where I know they deliver it in 24 hours. The same product. So we're not having patience any longer for waiting for something to get confirmed to happen. Price transparency. Seriously, the days of where pricing was not transparent is over. It's so easy to compare for this very same product that we want to buy, and not just travel through so many channels. And then we really want everything to be accurate. Terms and conditions are being read by consumers now because we all got burned, in particular when we purchased travel and people were not getting their refunds, couldn't get their money back because everything was canceled. So don't underestimate terms and conditions, the fine print. It is important, and consumers want to look at it and they want to understand it. And we need to fold this into our daily lives and our business. And then flexibility. Again, I think the days where you could launch promotions, non-refundable, have to pay 3 months out, and so on. Again, question mark. Everybody wants more flexibility today. And again, how do we fold this into our own business? Flights. For me, flight capacity has always been interesting, but I think it's becoming even more important in today's world. I don't have a lot of statistics. You've seen statistics by Amadeus yesterday. Flight capacity is really, really important to understand because airlines have very different strategies now. A lot of the commercial airlines, if you have noticed, have changed destinations. They're flying directly from major hubs out of Europe, out of North America, into resort destinations. They just launched a United Airlines flight, I think it's from New York, if I'm not mistaken, to Mallorca in Spain. Never happened before. Lufthansa flies directly to Maldives, and so on. At the same time, we need to understand that if we have hotels and destinations that are hard to reach, it may not be easy to get demand back because airlines will be very particular where they send their flights to, what type of airplanes they fly to. So load factors is something in revenue management that you must watch now and must fold into your strategies as well. Because if there's no flights to certain destinations, there's no demand, flat out, that's simple. Needless to say, booking behavior has changed dramatically as well. We saw some statistics yesterday, again by Amadeus, I believe. There is a much more focus by consumers on direct bookings today. That has to do with trust as well. That's my interpretation, at least, of it. But at the same time, if that's true, we must really focus on our website, on our content, making sure that in the purchasing funnel that we capture everybody's attention as early as possible. If we don't, there's no way you can convert. You can have the best booking engine in the world. If your website is not working, if you're not working closely with your digital and your marketing team, you will not be able to convert business directly. and OTAs, of course, they need to be managed. They're there to stay. They're not our enemies. Make them your friends, but manage them. Loyalty. I have a very simple view on loyalty. This may not be shared with everybody in the room, but I don't believe in loyalty programs. What I believe in, though, is relevance and personalization. If you're relevant in your communication, and if you are able to really have the purchasing journey more personalized, that's when you're able to capture attention and actually convert business. And for that, you need technology, and CRM is really the solution here. But I believe if you have a very good CRM and a good strategy to really be relevant in your communication, and again, this is where revenue management has to work very closely with communications and marketing today to make this work. And then traditional loyalty programs that are point-based, I'm not sure. I mean, they had their right for existence a while ago because they were the only means to help us to really create a database for people to talk to directly. But that has changed today. There's many ways how we can communicate. And Caroline touched on this a lot yesterday, right? And it really sings in my ears what she said. And I think that's something that we need to fold into our strategies today. Travel agents. There was a lot of bankruptcy. And you know what? That happened before COVID. COVID, again, was the accelerator of it. More mergers are happening. Traditional wholesale business is still there and is probably there to stay for a while, but it will no longer dominate our business. However, the bad banks are gaining strength. And as with the OTAs, we have to be very careful how we work with them. We want to work with them, but again, take it into your hands. Manage them. Understand what they do with your inventory and with your pricing. And take it in your hands. Lead it. Don't let them lead you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about gaining insights and demystify how insights can really help us to drive future business opportunities. And so let's spend a little time where insights are actually coming from today. There's a lot of information out there. Financial information, which is very transactional. So at the beginning of revenue management, that's all we really had, was really looking at where is business coming from, what are people spending, what are they spending it on, and so on. But today, there's consumer insights as well. And consumer insights are coming primarily from the web, but also from what you, of course, collect your own data through your CRM, through your history, and so on. But it's these insights that you really, really need to take and fold into your strategies today. And then there's market information. That's not going to go away. What's happening in my market? Is there more? But it's beyond bookings. It's also where is more supply coming, supply shrinking, and so on. And as I said, what are other factors that drive demand, like what the airlines can provide? But it's always important to understand what's relevant. How do I get it? And how do I turn data? I mean, data is always a big word. We all talk about data and how important it is. But data is worth nothing if you're not able to really translate that into a true insight that helps you understand the business and how to turn that again into a strategy moving forward to influence the future. Nothing new, but just to reflect. So I still believe these, what I call the 6 W's, are very relevant. Always think who is traveling, what are they purchasing, what are they looking for, where do they come from, where do they want to go, where else do they go, When do they book? When do they travel? Why? What's the purpose? Again, this is consumer insight driven a lot, right? I mean, what's really the purpose of travel? And how do they make their bookings? And on that note, I also want to pause a little bit and talk about demographics. Demographics, I believe, are not as relevant any longer as they used to be. Everything is behavioral driven today. So when we were thinking in age groups before and in gender behavior and in whatever, geographic behavior, that's very blurry today. People are at very different levels when they treat travel purchase in particular, where they get the information. It has nothing to do with age any longer or with where people come from. It's really about understanding people's behavior. And that's how you want to segment moving forward. Doesn't make our lives easier, but we need to embrace that and really base our ways to drive information and to drive strategies on that. Okay, let's show you a little video by Ivy. And please listen carefully. It's a little high level, and I want to talk a bit about Ivy's role first. So yesterday, Liz from Hilton was talking about what they're doing in terms of centralizing revenue management and how they use insights and information from a more centralized perspective, remember? So Ivy does not work in Liz's team, but they work very closely together. So Ivy works in the insights and research department of Hilton. So they really they conduct customer research. They really have a wealth of information about consumer behavior and how that potentially impacts their marketing strategies. And then Ivy's team works directly with the revenue management teams again to drive or create promotions, campaigns that are really consumer-centric. So it's no longer just transactional information. They're really folding all of this wealth of insights, consumer behavioral insights, into these strategies and work together. And Ivy is going to show you now an example how Hilton is doing this, and I think they're doing a really interesting job here. So listen carefully, and then we do a little exercise afterwards. Ready? Okay, over to you, Ivy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ivy Esquero, and I lead the Insights Planning and Strategy team for Hilton Marketing and Loyalty for Asia Pacific. And today I wanted to share with you a case study on how we use insights to drive strategy and product innovation. So before I do that, I wanted to share just some areas that we looked at and we used to actually gather insights and data. So some of you may be familiar with some of these sources, and these are the more traditional ways typically that brands have been using to gather customer feedback and inform their data and strategy. So some of these things include things like customer satisfaction studies, whether that's surveys or through in-person interviews, but there's also qualitative focus groups and maybe direct interviews with consumers to understand how they were doing and what they were doing. But more importantly, you probably are familiar with direct feedback from customer service. So, getting information from frontline team members who are directly talking to customers and understanding what the situation is on the ground. However, more and more brands have access to a lot more data. So, as we start to really think about digital strategy moving forward and strategy overall, these are some of the sources that I think we in the hospitality industry are just scratching the surface on. So some of these sources, for instance, are online reviews. So online reviews, I think traditionally or has been majority been used to really understand customer satisfaction and do some problem resolution. But there's actually a lot of really interesting ways that online reviews can be mined and can be understood to really help inform things like content preferences, product preferences, and ways that you can use that to develop product strategy. A second area is social listening. So social listening, I think, in the marketing and the PR world is used a lot for issues management and monitoring crises. But what if you can actually use social listening for things like pricing, innovation, or even understanding where your development pipeline should grow? And then finally, more and more, we see a lot of data coming in from web data and data signals across the digital realm. So this is really a place where a lot of brands are focusing a lot of our attention to really help define and understand better how customer journeys are, and to also refine their segmentation and targeting strategy. But today, what I wanted to do is really share a case study on how we use online reviews to extract some really great insights, but also to help inform our strategies during the pandemic, but also beyond. So this case study was a project that we started in China at the end of 2019, so right before the pandemic. And what we wanted to do was really take a look at how we could understand the customer journey and the booking journey in particular better for that market. And what we did was we looked at over 800,000 reviews across hotel reviews, OTA reviews, but also app reviews. What we then did was we clustered all of that data together to understand what were the different themes, and we coded those themes into groups and looked at those and analyzed those to really understand context in terms of what it actually meant for consumers. So we worked actually with some ethnographers and consumer insights experts within the region to understand the nuance of language. And then we did this over and over until we came up with some key themes. In the end, what was interesting was, while there were only 7% of those reviews, those 800,000 plus reviews that were related to booking, that still represented about 48,000 reviews, right? So, I think if you are familiar with some of the small data surveys that we do, typically you're talking to 1,000 to 2,000 customers at a time. So this really represented a big opportunity for us to go deeper into some of these themes. So while the number of reviews related to booking were much fewer than stay reviews, we were able to really dig into also what was noise versus what was actually meaningful. So in this case, what we found was about 70% of all reviews related to stay and booking were substantive. So that gave us a lot of information, but also gave us some benchmarks to identify future chatter. So what we did find was there were 10 themes that were related to booking. But as we started to analyze the stay behaviors as well and the stay reviews, we found that there were these themes that also, these themes were also prevalent within the stay journey. So I'll touch on a couple of these. So the top 3 themes were around warm service, room comfort, and accessibility. So warm service is all about how you feel when you arrive at the hotel, or when you receive attentive service from team members. But it also is about your experience prior to booking or prior to even getting to the hotel, right? Is the brand coming across as somebody caring for your stay beyond just you at the property? Accessibility is all about, how to get there. Is it easy to get to? Location, and room comfort is all about, all the things that make that room really great and really, really fun to stay in. So a few outcomes from this was that the initial classification already gave us some great insights into how expectations change over the course of the consumer journey, from pre-booking to post-stay, and what remained consistent throughout. Additionally, what we found was, because we had a great number of reviews to work with, we were able to identify some sub-themes that really gave us more context into the bigger themes and provided more ideas on the types of experiences that could potentially meet customer needs. Another important output was being able to understand how these themes changed over time. So for some platforms, we were actually able to go back up to 3 years to allow us to really track patterns and track changes over time. So some of the things that we were able to see, for instance, was, understand what things were consistently important versus what were those things that were newly emerging, like say in the past 6 months. It also allowed us to focus more of the sub-theme analysis on the areas of opportunity that were growing and really understand who was driving those changes. So, we were able to look at what type of messaging and what type of traveler was actually engaging with these themes. Lastly, around sizing and growth, we were also able to isolate some of the themes that have the potential to grow not just audiences, but potential product. So as we started to group these themes, we were also able to identify some opportunity areas. So one, it highlighted the need to understand what were the minimum expectations. So what are those must-win areas that we need to deliver to meet or exceed guest expectations? So this, the top 3 themes that I shared earlier actually are in this must-win category. But there were also other areas that we saw that were more focused around disruption or innovation. So booking experience is actually one of these things. It's not something that's discussed much, but rather than ignoring it, what we looked at was, is there a possibility to proactively change the expectations that people have around this area? And then the last thing is that we were also able to look at areas that were potentially lower priorities for guests, but when they show up, they actually provide opportunities to over-deliver and drive guest love. So, instant gratification was one of these themes that we found, for instance, that we wanted to champion. And we used, this need and this theme to really build a case around our new automated upgrades. And I don't know if some of you are Hilton Honors members, but now, instead of having to wait until you get to the property, our Gold and Diamond members, when those upgrades are available, will find out up to 72 hours before about their room upgrades, and they can choose the room that they can upgrade to. So what this does for us and what we saw in the research was that these are kinds of experiences that build anticipation and build guest love, right? So it builds reinforcement for us of the value of Hilton Honors and Elite membership. So this research really helped us drive that business case for that product. The last thing I wanted to mention is how useful this approach was in pivoting very quickly. So as I mentioned, we started this research in 2019, but when COVID happened, we were able to go back into the data and pivot very quickly because we already had some of these benchmarks in place. So from a product and experience point of view, really early on, we were able to identify that cancellation and flexibility was going to be very important for guests. And so, that was something that we really built into our pandemic strategy. Another thing that we saw even before the pandemic was around how important cleanliness was, to overall guests, but in particular family travelers. So we really wanted to make that a core tenet. And so we introduced Clean Stay very early on in our messaging to reassure guests that they were coming into a place that was really safe for them and for their families. And then finally, something that we also saw that was important and growing was around F&B, particularly, the in-room dining experience. So as we saw the pandemic really impacting our hotels, we identified the need to really focus on in-room becoming more important and becoming an area of delight versus the buffet and versus the need for variety. So, to leave you, hopefully today to the rest of your to your sessions, we really wanted to share, I wanted to share some lessons learned around what we did and how we used the data. So, first, I think it's really important to start to think about some new data sources beyond how they're currently used. So if you're using reviews now, again, to evaluate hotels or look at problem resolution, potentially, how can you start looking at some of these reviews, look at social listening, looking at digital data to really help inform, the broader product and brand strategy. Second is around triangulating and really connecting data across sources. So, we use, these reviews, but we looked at different types of reviews, but we also triangulated and mapped that back to consumer behavior on our own channels to make sure that we were, having a holistic picture of how our consumers behaved and reacted. And then finally, I think, this last bit is really important, right? We have a lot of data now at our fingertips, but how do we make sure that we're not just looking at numbers, but starting to really understand consumers on top of it? So, layering that qualitative context and approach, understanding the consumer and what they needed was much more powerful than just relying on the data and the signals alone. So how do you make sure that you combine those two to really drive more powerful insights and strategy? So that's all I had for you today. Thank you so much for your time. Hopefully this was interesting and gave you some more ideas and feeds into some of the discussions you have with Philip later on. Thank you and talk soon.
Thank you, Ivy. Goodbye. All right. So Heidi will help me to divide you into groups. So whoever wants to participate, there's flip charts. It's a class, right? You remember that? So you make it up, and we'll divide you into groups. And vendors, feel free to participate or to showcase what you can offer in terms of insights and data. But the exercise really is, what are the revenue decisions that I have to make every day? And now think beyond your normal duty as a revenue manager. How can you really help the overall organization from a true holistic marketing perspective? So it's not just daily pricing any longer. I mean, from my perspective in revenue, there's a bigger responsibility in today's world, and that is really how can we use information and insights to truly drive overall top-line revenues through strategic marketing. What do you need to know to make these decisions? So think about the video. It was very much focusing on reviews, of course, but there was a lot of other information in there as well. But also, what do you think you need to really make these decisions? Think about internal information. What do you have yourself? But also, what is external information that you need to use, want to use, to help you drive decisions? And then who's actually in the team responsible for what? Just think a little bit through. You and your team members. Who's responsible for what? Ready? So there is different types of data sets. There's information about consumer spending, how they spend their money, where they spend it, and what they spend it on. There's behavioral information. Where is research conducted? Where do they book, and so on. And you see there's always these W's there, right? So these W's are very important. And then there's market information. And as you all pointed out as well, what are the reports, the typical reports that we look at? Is the obvious ones from PMS, finance systems, what have you. But also behavioral information, do not underestimate. Social listening, for example, is something that is inexpensive to do, but it's very important, and fold this into your strategies as well. And then market information. And everything needs to be measured. That's very close to my heart. What gets measured gets done. An old rule. Okay, now let's listen to Sherri Kimes. And again, you ready? Okay, over to you, Sherri.
Hi, this is Sherri Kimes, and I have a mission for you, should you choose to accept it. How can you use your menus as revenue generators in your F&B outlets, for banqueting, all over the place? So let's just kind of take a look at this. Let's start off and look at some of the things from user experience design. And they've got names, but let's look at the basic concepts here. Make it less complex, make it easy, highlight what you want to sell, and then people tend to remember the first and the last and the most recent. And those of you who are in kind of e-commerce know these sorts of things. Okay, Hicks Law. You want to make it easier. You want to decrease the decision time for your customer. Make it less complex. Amazon is masterful at this, almost too masterful, because it's so easy just to buy now with one click. But fewer choices, highlighting your recommended options, and so forth. So let's just take a look at some of this. This is a study that was done. We're looking at asking customers to choose. Okay, you got 24 jams versus 6 jams. When you're confronted with so many choices, our minds just kind of shut down, right? And so with the 24 jams, 60% of shoppers stopped for a sample, and 2 samples were tasted on average, and about 3% of them purchased. Versus with 6, 40% stopped, 2 samples tasted, but 30% bought. So it makes it easier for people to decide. Or look at this one, where they're highlighting, okay, best value. This is the one that we want them to buy. And reducing cognitive load, avoiding visual clutter, making it easy for people to process. This is one that my students found. Like, this is oh my goodness, what were they thinking? This is a little bit of overkill, shall we say? Versus look at this sort of thing, the isolation effect. Calls to action should look different, highlighting what you want to sell. This red apple really stands out a whole lot. And then people tend to remember the first and the last items in a series. And on average, people have about 5 things in short-term memory. And this is from research. So the implications of this is that you want to put what you want to sell at the top or bottom of a list and reduce the number of items to choose from. Again, think menus. Oh, goodness sakes, this one is a little bit much, isn't it? Versus McDonald's is really good at this, reducing the choice, making it easier. And look at the way that they're kind of making this one a little bit larger. And then when we get into menu design, there's basically, these are all research-based, because there's a lot of people who talk about menus, but as a academic, I always like the research, so it kind of ties in with this session. So things on how you name it, how you describe it, where and how you place it, and how the price is shown. And there's a lot more than this, but this is enough to get us started here. And so how you name it, using descriptive labels, so things like geographic, it's from, it's Maine lobster, nostalgic, grandma's, sensory, it's a succulent such and such, and and all of a sudden you start to feel a little hungry. Or brand, Jack Daniels. I mean, and it's associated. People associate that with some sort of quality, and they find it interesting. So this is a study that was done at Cornell. And so they had different sets of menus. So they had regular name, for example, red beans with rice, traditional Cajun red beans with rice was the descriptive name. Or let's just look at another one, chocolate pudding, satin chocolate pudding, or if we look at the seafood fillet, succulent Italian seafood fillet, and it better be Italian, right? But you look at these words that they're using here, and you're probably looking at this and going, yeah, right, Sherri, like this is going to make a difference. Well, yeah, it did. 27% increase in sales with the more descriptive names, higher perception of quality, and an increased intent to return. Some of these things hard to believe, but these are all shown in the research. And then how you describe it. Do you want to have it be simple or do you want to have it be complex? And so here's a study that was done. The simple was just listing the ingredients, which quite frankly is the way a lot of times our chef will put it, versus the complex, the 10-ounce grilled tenderloin, sweet garlic and thyme crust, slice. Oh, getting hungry, hungry, hungry. Okay, so how do people react to this? Well, they were willing to pay more for the more complex one. They viewed it as higher quality and a higher intention to buy. Again, think about this with your menus. And then where and how you place it. So where on the page, think back to this recency effect that we just talked about, where should it be located, and what about highlighting it? And so Google is wonderful at this. And if you think about this heat map, what's up here? What's over there? Ads. Google is revenue managing their landing page. And very frequently, most of us don't go much past the first page, and so Google's using that well. Or you could even look at this with Expedia or with Chope. Or if you start to look at the delivery apps, the ones that are at the top are the ones that tend to get booked or booked first. And so back again to this whole thing, we're making it easy for people to choose. And so basically, the first 2 or 3 items in a category typically sell the best, which goes back to some of the user experience design. So you want to place your highest margin items at the beginning of the list, particularly if they're popular. And the most frequently sold items are easy to find on the menu. So again, you want to put your high margin items in an easy to find location because that's what you want people to buy. And so highlighting, the pictures, think about that. It becomes food porn, right? The picture looks so appetizing, you want to have it. Or boxing things, or saying it's the house special or the chef's special. Again, what you're doing is you're highlighting it, making it easy for people. And then how the price is shown with the currency and the order of the price and then the alignment of the price. And we're not going to talk about decoys and contrast, but this is basically when you have something super expensive on the menu. Let's say you've got a $400 bottle of Dom Perignon and the next cheapest bottle is maybe $120, and all of a sudden the $120 wine looks good. That's a decoy sort of thing. It's like, wow, what a deal I'm getting. And so this is a study that I did with one of my former PhD students, and we took a series of menus and we had different ones. Some of them had dollar signs, some of them listed the word dollars, and some of them just had a number. And we went through and looked to see what difference did it make. Well, it was really quite interesting. The average check per person for any mention of currency was about 8% lower than if there was no mention of currency. And this comes from a psychological concept called fear of paying, pain of paying. And so a real simple thing is just get rid of the dollar signs or any mention of currency. And then the price order, low to high, it makes it too easy for people to choose the first one. This is back to kind of the primacy and recency effect. You probably want to have it mixed because you're trying to, not that we're trying to confuse people, which actually we sort of are, is that you don't want to make them, okay, I'm going to go for the cheapest. I'm going to go for the cheapest. We're going to have these mixed in here. And then should you have them aligned or obscured? The research on this one, look at how easy it is to compare the prices here, just to go up and down the list, versus here, good, no dollar signs, and they're kind of obscured a little bit. You're not highlighting the price. And so now, after this video, your mission should you choose to accept it, is to analyze this menu that Philip's about to share with you. And what I want you to do is take a look at it and figure out how can you improve it? What are some of the things that we just talked about that you could put into there? And I could tell you that this is something that works really, really well and is a great way to be able to increase revenue. So good luck. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to hearing how you did.
I mean, anything that you think could be improved. But think about what Sherri Kimes shared with us. Anybody who wants to comment? Sure.
It's very cluttered, very hard to read what we are looking at.
Now we don't have mics. Say it.
It's very cluttered, very hard to read what you are looking at.
Very cluttered, right? You can't navigate through it. Anything on pricing? Bit hard to read, right?
There are two good things about it in terms of pricing. The first thing that Professor mentioned that it should not have the dollar sign that encourages, so it does not have a dollar sign.
Doesn't have a currency, so it makes it a bit clearer, right? I mean, you would think, assuming you know in which country you are, of course, right? That it's the currency.
The second one is it should be a mixed pricing. So it is a mixed pricing. It's not going from top to bottom because it is the way it has been arranged. But that are the only two good things. Rest all are bad about this menu and pricing.
Yeah. What about namings? What did she say about namings?
It should be a descriptive one, which
More descriptive, right? And then what about general volume of offerings? Overwhelming, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is, I know in Asia, often we have menus that just don't end. It frustrates me. I always like, okay, where's that black board with the chalk with the 3 options? And then I'm happy.
Waffle House is it's a very traditional U.S. restaurant. The menu is on a piece of paper and served as
Yeah.
So it says breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So if I look at it, the left-hand side is all breakfast, and then the right-hand side is lunch and dinner. But it wasn't have a clear delineation. And I think they're trying to use the color. The green is trying to symbolize salad, and then the whites are the drinks or something else like that. But I think the main selling point is waffle, but there's no focal point to the waffle.
Where's the bloody waffle, right? Exactly. Great ops. Yeah. 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 Great observation. So lots of stuff that can be improved, right? Also, in today's world, when we can use, now that we're used to QR codes, digitalize your menus, collect the data, and then use it to improve moving forward. Okay, I want to wrap up today's session, as we have lots of other stuff to do. This is just some word of advice from my end. So decision making is easier when it's supported with data and insights, always. And don't always assume that the competition is right. Be a leader, don't be a follower. Work as a team. I think this came out in today's exercise as well, right? It's not just the revenue manager who's in charge of pricing, what have you. It's a team effort. That's where the power is. There's always opportunities. Never forget that. Always look for the opportunity. And use this time. We're still not in full steam business. Use this time to create a competitive edge. Work with your marketing team in particular. So listen to your customers and unlock micro segment level information. There's so much more information available that we can use to make better decisions. Expand your horizons, build partnerships. Partnerships, again, Caroline touched on this yesterday as well, on where data sits. You don't own everything, but you can make it work to your advantage. Make better decisions, make it better, not just safer. So when we talk about product, again, work with your marketing team. This is the time to reposition yourself. Who are you? What stands out? What are your unique selling points? Or do you have to create new ones? Use technology, and I'm not saying this because we have all these, our sponsors in the room here. I firmly believe this. Technology is here to help us make better decisions moving forward and make our lives easier. And stay nimble beyond this crisis. Don't become complacent. There was a lot of complacency before this crisis. Let's get back to work. Roll up the sleeves. It's hard work, but it will make things better. And look, this is my final word. There's really only two options that you have. You can just, make sure that you have a parachute and that you survive, that you just land on your feet. Too easy. I go for this. Build yourself a jetpack. The sky is the limit. And life is a lot more fun when you treat challenges in creative ways. That's from our dear friend Bill Gates. And I firmly believe this. Let's have fun. And with that, thank you very much.